Our first reading is from Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words. Yet no sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. They're more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. By them your servant is warned. In keeping them there is great reward. But who can discern their own errors? Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of great transgression. May these words of my mouth and this meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, Lord, my rock and my redeemer. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Jesus Christ, according to Mark, glory to you, O Lord. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please do take your seats. And we're going to think a little bit together about that first reading we heard, Psalm 19. Over the next few weeks, we're going to spend a bit of time learning from these different psalms in the Bible. Now, the Psalms is often known as the prayer book of the Bible. And if you've ever used a prayer book, you'll know that what happens in a prayer book is you're given words to say. You're given prayers to pray and things to respond to. And you might not always agree with the things that you're reading and having to say, but part of the thing about a prayer book is you pick it up and you read it and you say the words. And in some sense, you're invited to make the words your own. And so it is when we come to Psalm 19. This prayer book, this particular prayer in the prayer book, is giving us things to say, things to think about the God who, it claims, made the whole universe. And as I've been thinking about it, I think the question that Psalm 19 puts to us, wherever we're coming from this morning, is this: how do you relate to the universe? Now, you might think that's a rather esoteric, rather abstract, almost nonsensical question. How does one relate to the universe? The universe is just there. I don't really go about my days thinking how I relate to the universe. But actually, when you start to dig into that question, as Psalm 19 addresses it, then the question of how you relate to the universe actually changes an awful lot about how you approach your life. So if you do think that the universe is just there, that it is sort of inert and silent and to be made the most of by human beings, well, you don't have to look far in history, maybe particularly recent history in the West, to see how that view has contributed to the exploitation of our natural world. If you think the universe is just there to be taken advantage of, there to be mastered, well, very sadly, the history of the West is one of exploitation, of that mastery doing bad things. And we're only just beginning to wake up and try and recover from that way of seeing the world around us, the natural world. And partly maybe because that view is unattractive to us today, others of us might see much more agency in the universe, by which I mean we don't think it's something sort of inert to be mastered, but it's something that has real power that we can tap into. And a view which in previous generations might have seemed a bit of a sort of fringe view is more and more how lots of us would want to live our lives and make sense of the world. I think you saw this view that the universe has a power, has an agency, in the way that lots of people spoke in the midst of the pandemic. They talked about nature healing. Nature is healing was a thing that we often spoke about as we saw the way that as humans retreated from the natural world, we stopped polluting, we stopped going out into it because we had to stay at home. Nature returned to places where it had been sort of driven away by human hands. Or you think about the way that people instinctively, I think, increasingly look to the universe for guidance, for making sense of this strange world. So a few years ago, Jim Carrey was interviewed on the Graham Norton Show, and he talked about how in his early days as a comedian, he was working in the comedy clubs, and he used to drive home and sit on his drive and manifest his dreams for the rest of his life, visualize what he wanted to do. Interestingly, he said he learnt it from his Catholic school teacher, who said she used to pray about things and get what she prayed for. Carey didn't believe in God, but he visualized where he wanted his life to go. And one thing he did was he wrote himself a check for $10 million, and he post-dated it. He dated it for 5 or 6 years in the future. $10 million. 6 months before that date, it was a Thanksgiving day, 6 years in the future. 6 months, though, before that date came, he starred in a film that made him $10 million. He got what he asked for. It's interesting, he said he basically prayed to the universe. And you might think that's a bit weird, a bit sort of out there, but think about the way we talk all the time. I was just speaking to a family member over the summer about our future plans and where we might go next after my job here finishes. And she said, don't worry, I believe that there's a right time for everything, that it will become clear in due course, the universe will make clear to you where to go next. She doesn't believe in God herself, but she has that sense, this instinct. I think all of us share that there is something beyond our lives that has a contribution to it. It's not we're alone in the universe and all around us is silent. So suddenly the question how you relate to the universe becomes important. Do you think it's inert, there's nothing there, just silent, waiting for you to master it? Do you think it has an agency of its own, a power even, that like Jim Carrey you can tap into, a shaping force on your life? That's what Psalm 19 is about. But Psalm 19 gives a slightly different answer to both of those ways of seeing it. It says neither is the universe inert and silent, nor is it this power that you've got to try and control or tap into. Rather, the universe is a revelation. It's revealing things about something else. It's a signpost, if you like. In all its grandeur and beauty and wonder, it's pointing away from itself to something else. The first thing it points to is that it points to God. You heard it, I hope, in the very first line. The heavens declare the glory of God. Without words, without saying anything, it's not like sort of a plane writing in the sky, but the universe, the natural world, all around you where you look, it is speaking without words, declaring things about who God is and what he's like. So in other words, the universe is not inert and silent, waiting to be mastered by us. It's more like an emissary or an ambassador. That if you're serious about it, about listening to what it has to say, you won't just ride over it roughshod. You will treat it with the dignity that an ambassador would be treated. But nor is it a power for you to master, or a power for you to grapple with, like Jim Carrey did, and get it on your side. If you've got ears to hear it, it's telling you things about the God who made it. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. If you've got ears to hear it, the universe is pointing away from itself. I'm getting attacked by a wasp. I don't know what that message is to me. But the universe is pointing to the God who made it. It's also, though, pointing to something else. Pointing to, well, this book I've got in my hand, the Bible. Because the way that the psalm works, the first half of it is about the heavens declaring God's glory, the natural world expressing amazing things about God. But then it flips halfway through. In verse 7, the law of the Lord, it says, is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy. The precepts, it gives lots and lots of words describing the words that we have come to know as the Bible, Scripture. The words that God reveals in these literal words in front of me. And it's really striking the way that the psalmist talks about these words here as opposed to the words that creation speaks without words. In verses 1 to 6, talking about the natural world, the psalmist keeps on using a word for God, which is really about God's power in creation, his sort of might, his grandeur. The heavens declare the glory of God. Then in verse 7 onwards, he changes and uses a totally different word to talk about the same being. The law of the Lord, it's in capital letters in most Bibles. And that really is God's particular, Christians often say, his covenant name. The name that he reveals as his personal, loving concern for his people in a particular way. Now that's a really interesting sort of movement in the psalm. It's a piece of poetry, so you would be looking for sort of poetic details like that to tell you what's going on with it. Here's another detail you might have heard in verses 1 to 6. For the psalmist, the sort of the pinnacle of God's creative power and force is the sun. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. He sees it as this sort of amazing sort of horse riding across the sky. You think for an ancient Near Eastern person looking up, seeing this ball of gas pouring out heat and light. You know, is there anything more impressive in all creation to them? He says, the psalmist, that nothing is hidden from its heat. You know, if on a hot day, the sun, you can almost nowhere to hide, particularly if you're in a sort of desert climate. The sun gets everywhere and warms the whole place up. That's verses 1 to 6, the sun, nothing hidden from its heat. In the second half of the psalm, though, the psalmist points to one place that is hidden. In verse 12, who can discern their own errors? Forgive my hidden faults. There's one thing that is hidden inside of me. As the psalmist reflects on creation and the word from God he has before him, he says on the one hand, it's in its grandeur, it is like nothing else. It's amazing. The sun, nothing hidden from it, except his own heart, where there are things hidden. Now, what's the point of that? Put those two ideas together. I think it's something like this. You can look at the heavens around you, the creation in all its beauty and glory, and it speaks amazing things about the God who made it. And if you've got ears to hear, you will learn something about the being behind all of this. But if you just stay there, you will miss out on a word, on speech from God that has yet more power and effect to speak into your life and to provide the help that you need with even your hidden faults. Just think again about Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million. It was interesting on the Graham Norton show when he shared that story. Understandably, the whole audience burst out in applause. Amazing, you got what you asked for. Jim Carrey has said elsewhere, though, well, I'll quote from him, "I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer." He would say himself, don't pray to the universe for $10 million, or do, so you can realize what a waste it is. None of those people who applauded him would have agreed with him in that moment. Well, of course I'd want to get a check for $10 million. Where do I have to go to ask for that? Carey has a perspective now we didn't have on the driveway to know that was a foolish request because it didn't provide him what he was looking for all along. The tragedy is for almost all of us, we don't realize how foolish some of our requests would be. We think we know the best way for our lives to go. Jim Carrey is saying, you don't. The psalmist agrees. There are things about you that are hidden to you. That means you will be pursuing the wrong goals in life that will do you harm, not good. And if all you think is the universe can sort of direct me, or the universe is silent and has got no help to me, you're missing out. Because the psalmist says there is someone who can show you what's hidden in you and direct you to the sort of goals, to be the sort of person, more importantly, that you need to be, so that you won't be shipwrecked on your mistaken dreams, but you'll come back in tune with the way that God made you. So you see the wonderful news that Psalm 19 wants us to listen, to understand, to believe, is that neither is the universe silent, nor is it just a power that you can tap into to achieve your goals. It is pointing us to a speaking God, a God who is there, a God who is full of power and grandeur and might, but also deep, intimate love. And he has revealed himself, and we can know him. And we can even have him closer to us than our very closest thoughts. And we can have him at work in our lives, working on even the things that we can't see about ourselves that most need his input, his change, his direction, his power. And here's the thing, he loves us so much that he won't just leave us in the dark. He won't just leave us with hidden faults that we can't see. He has stepped in the person of Jesus Christ so that we can know him intimately. We can have him as our closest companion. It's why, as part of our service this morning, we'll celebrate Holy Communion. We will remember, and if we are followers of Jesus Christ, delight in his costly love for us, the lengths that he will go to come alongside us, live in us, and change us in just the ways that we need. Well, let's be quiet for a few moments to reflect on these things for ourselves, and then Nick will come and lead us in the rest of our service.